What what is the difference between a grocery store and a fine dining experience? Well, it's the difference between a bag full of all the ingredients and a guided experience where every detail is handled. As photographers, we have the choice to be either, and most of us choose somewhere in between. Today, we're exploring the standard of full service. Hey there, Lens Legends, and welcome to another episode of the Portrait Profit Show, where we focus on the business side of photography. I'm your host, Jim Landers, your guide on the business side. The Portrait Profit Show is brought to you by Digital Pro Lab and Landers Photography School. For Digital Pro Lab, Amanda and her amazing, wonderful team are going to make you look like a hero. Now, if you watch the show, you know that I feel that way about Digital Pro Lab, but have you given yourself the opportunity to feel that same way? I recommend that you go to digitalprolab.com, digitalprolab.com to experience that difference the Digital Pro Lab can make, because Amanda hires fantastic people that love what they do. They're career people, and it shows. Go to digitalprolab.com. The show is also sponsored by Landers Photography School. That's me. That's my company. And I specialize in both the photography side and the business side. But what I really like doing is finding out who you are and the direction you want to go. And I do that with a free Zoom call, a free consultation, just you and me, a private little session where we can talk about you. And let me put that up on the screen so you know where to go to get that. Now, this link you see on my screen is a link directly to my calendar. And so you see times that I have available and you choose the one that's right for you. And then we meet via Zoom, find out what's working in your world, what's not, and we plan a path to get to what you want. You can find that and just in case you don't see it here on the screen, because I know it's small if you're on Instagram, it's Calendly, almost like calendar, but calendly.com/photo school /15MIN. That's how to put yourself on my calendar. Now, I encourage you to make comments and ask questions throughout this lesson today. And I want you to go to the comment section right now and enter in hashtag live. So I know you're watching us live here today on either Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or YouTube, because we're simulcast to several different places. And for those who are watching the replay, do me a favor and enter in hashtag replay. I also request that you share the Portrait Profit Show, because that's how people find out about the show. We don't. This is something that Amanda and I do out of the kindness of our hearts, because we believe it helps the photographer industry, helps photographers. And so we're not charging for this, and we don't have a budget for advertising. So we rely on you telling other people about the show. So share the Portrait Profit Show. Now, every image, every commissioned image has an intended use. Just in case you don't know what commissioned means, commission just means that someone is paying to have the work done. That's all that means. Sometimes the image is created for a business profile, for a website, for publication, for a marketing campaign. Sometimes it's created for the purpose of creating an album. Sometimes it's created to become a finished portrait artwork displayed in a home or in an office or some other meaningful space. The purpose of the image determines what full service means. Now, in a photography business, you're the one who's determining what it is that you do, what you define as a complete service. However, full service is not defined by the photographer. It's defined by the image. So whether to build a full service business is the photographer's decision. You don't have to. In fact, for most, it's not a good idea, because there's a lot of steps. In fact, there's all the steps. It's 15 categories of steps. You know what? I'll put that up on the screen because I have that here also. Ooh, that's tiny. Let's make that big. There we go. Still too small for you to see it. If you want the handout, this is part of today's handout. It'll include all 15 of these. Now, we're not going to go through every single one of them because I only have an hour to spend with you here today. And it would take a lot more than that, an hour to go through all of these different potential steps in a full service business. So for now, I'll take that down. I might bring that back up here in a bit. But you can decide what kind of business model to build, what products to offer, who you want to serve, and whether full service belongs in the business that you're creating. But once an image has an intended use, that intent determines what full service requires. The photographer chooses the business model. The image's intent determines the full service standard. So when I say full service and you don't fit the description, don't think that I have something in my mind that's negative about what you do. And don't in your mind perceive that there's anything negative about not having a full service standard. It's just your choice of business model. But if you want full service, or if you're curious about what full service means, well, that's what we're going to be talking about. Before we go any further, I want to make something clear. I said it before. I want to make sure I'm saying it again because I want to be clear on this. Not every photographer should build a full service business. We have different paths. I mean, it'd be like saying everybody needs to get on I-10 or I-35 or I-45 or I-40. No, this makes no sense. You travel the road that is best for you, the best for your goals, the best for your family. We have different paths, different goals, different clients, different types of work, and different visions for the lives of the lives that our businesses are trying to support. Volume work, mini sessions, event coverage, commercial work, business portraits, school portraits, sports images. There's so many different types. All of them are viable when they are built intentionally. A photographer may deliver digital files and rightly consider the job complete according to the business model they promised. They delivered what they said they would deliver. That can be honest, clear, valid, but complete according to the business model and full service according to the image's intended use are not necessarily the same thing. In fact, they often aren't the same thing. Over time, digital delivery became normal. It's 2026. So over the last quarter of a century, digital delivery became normal. It wasn't normal prior to that. In fact, almost all photographers were some level of full service prior to digital because, well, you didn't hand out the negative. So I'll say that again here in a second. And many photographers and clients have, over that period of time, began to believe the digital file was the final product for a photographer, even when the image was going to become something more, such as a printed portrait, go into an album, some other type of displayed artwork. Now, that does not mean photographers stopped caring. It doesn't mean that at all, not even close. It means the standard has shifted. In fact, there are multiple standards. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about full service photography as a professional and artistic standard. We will look at how the expectation is created before the client ever reaches out, how the process should guide them from desire to the image's intended state, and how you can build that service around the result you promise. Chapter 1. By the way, if you want today's handout, send me an email, jim@portraitprofits.com, letting me know that you want today's handout. And yes, it will include that. And everything that we're talking about today. So it includes quite a bit. But that's how you get that. Just reach out to me, jim@portraitprofits.com, or you can enter in hashtag, and you see it here on the screen right now, hashtag handout. Hashtag handout. Chapter 1. The standard of a professional service. Now, the intent of any professional leaves the client with a result they hired the professional to create. It doesn't matter whether it's photography or some other service. But for portrait photographers, this matters because we are both artists and service providers. As artists, we create the work with intention. We just have to define what that intention is. As service providers, we build the path that helps the work reach the form it was promised to reach. People don't hire professionals so they can finish the work themselves after the professional has left. They hire the professional because they want it handled well, handled completely, and handled with care from beginning to end. Even when digital files are the intended final product, there is still a right way to complete that service. A business headshot client may need digital files. That may be the intended result. But those files can be prepared for their intended use. They can be organized clearly. And follow up on so that the client feels confident in how to use them. Completion does not always mean something on the wall. Maybe for a portrait photographer it could, but for others it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means the photographer has fulfilled the promise of their business model with care. I'll say it one more time. Completion does not always mean something on the wall. It means the photographer has fulfilled the promise of their business model with care. Full service asks a different question, though. Has the image reached the last possible state required by its intended use? Over time, professional photography changed in a way many of us did not fully recognize while it was happening. Before digital delivery, before it became the norm or the common expectation, portrait clients generally did not expect the negatives as a finished product. In fact, they didn't expect the negatives at all. In fact, they probably never even saw the negatives. The negative was part of the creative and production process. What the client experienced was finished photographs. Once digital delivery became practical, the market changed. Maybe not overnight, but relatively quickly. Competitors started including digital files, though. Then clients started asking for them because they knew what to do with them. And newer photographers entered the profession in a world where file delivery already felt normal. Over time, the profession helped train clients to believe that the digital file was the finished product, even when the portrait was created for something more permanent, visible, finished. The shift changed more than the deliverable. It changed the standard. Many clients now assume that receiving files and printing suggestions maybe is simply how professional photography works. There's a lot of photographers that think that too. They aren't correct, but that may be their business model, and so they'd be correct in their business model. They may not realize that the most important decisions are still ahead of them because they have rarely been shown a process where the photographer carries the work all the way to completion. I mean, it's happened several times for me because I am full service. And so that means a print is on the wall as a completion of the service. And the majority of them who haven't worked with me before say, I didn't even know photographers offered this. And prior to digital, photographers offered this as the norm, printed and framed work. They didn't always put it on the wall. In fact, that was actually pretty rare. But still, how many photographers today start their business thinking that they are going to make printed work that exists, framed, or however it needs to be displayed on the wall. It's not the norm anymore like it used to be. Now, that doesn't mean that's old. It is, but it still is something that people value. You may say, well, not the people that I cross paths with. Well, let's talk about that more in here just a little bit. A simple way to understand this is to look at a different profession. Now, you may have noticed in the show graphic, and let me put that up in a different way. So there's the show graphic. You may have noticed in the show graphic that is a image of someone holding a bag of nails with a bow on it. And so I want you to imagine a roofer coming to your home, removing the old roof, loading everything into a roll-off dumpster. The cleanup is done. It looks fantastic. The space really looks good. And from a distance, it appears that they're wrapping up. As the dumpster is being hauled away, the business owner or job manager walks up to you, to your front door, and comes over with a something, holding something that looks really pretty. It's a bag of nails wrapped in a ribbon, or tied up with a ribbon, presented with care and a sense of pride. They don't do that. But that would be the equivalent of giving someone digital files when the job's not done yet. Now, more about the roofer. He walks up with a smile, hands you that bag of nails with the bow, so proud, and explains that the job is complete except for installing the shingles. Since you already know how to use a hammer and nails, it never even crossed his mind that that final part was actually the roofer's responsibility. No. He thanks you, tells you he looks forward to working with you again, and encourages you to tell your friends about him. Yeah, he pointed at the pile of shingles over there next to the garage. You know how to use a hammer and nails, so therefore, why can't you finish it? You hand your clients, or deliver in some way, digital files. If that's not in a complete state, you're doing exactly the same thing as no roofer would ever do. You're not completing the job. No one would consider what that roofer did to be full service. It would not matter how hard he worked, how clean the job site looked, how beautifully he presented the nails. The homeowner did not hire him for materials or partial progress. They hired him for a new roof until the roof reaches the state required by its purpose. There is still work left. In photography, the issue is more subtle. Not quite as obvious now. 25 years ago, completely obvious. Everybody would have recognized it. Now, it doesn't mean we've gotten lazy over time. It means that there are additional tools to choose from, and some of them take us less time, which we like. But we have to decide, is that what is best for us and our client? A photographer may have completed the deliverable that they promised. That's what matters. That can be honest. That can be valid. But complete according to the business model and full service according to the intent of the image are totally different standards. Doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong. You may have an opinion that shapes what's right and what's wrong, but that alone doesn't define what's right or what's wrong. Digital files may be delivered, and from the photographer's perspective, the job may be complete. From the client's side, however, the most important decisions may still be sitting in front of them. What should be printed? How should I print it? How will it be presented? Like, where's it going to live? And what the final result should become are still yet to be resolved. Unlike the example of the homeowner and dealing with a roofer, many clients do not even have the experience to navigate those decisions well. They don't know how to print, they don't know how to frame, they might know how to install, but they probably don't know that either. So the responsibility falls back onto them without them recognizing how much has been handed over to them. Artists care about the final state of the work. A sculptor does not begin a sculpture and then at some point hand a buyer a chisel and sandpaper. Nope, they complete the work. And sometimes that does mean installation. In fact, a lot of times it does. That's an artist. A painter. They don't begin a painting and then hand their patron the paint and the brushes to complete the artwork. The artist understands the intended state of the work and carries it there. A business decision may choose a different stopping point, and that may be valid within the business model. But that chosen stopping point is likely prior to full service. Again, if it's the business model, then it's correct. It just doesn't meet the standard of full service. Portrait photography deserves to be understood through that same standard when the intended result is finished artwork. The digital file may be part of the process, just as a negative once was, and for some photographers still is. But it is not automatically the completed work. When the intended result is the portrait artwork for display, stopping at the digital file leaves the remaining work within the image's intent for the client to have to figure out on their own. But they're not the pro here. This is our area of expertise. Most clients accept this, though, because they assume that is simply how the process works. They have not been shown anything different. When they do encounter a photographer who carries the work all the way through to a finished result, the difference becomes overwhelming. It's clear. The investment may not be within the reach of everyone, though, and that's another reason why there needs to be photographers at different standards who are doing different things. But the value of full service makes sense in a way that it may not have ever made before. That's the standard that I want to establish. A photographer can complete the job they promised and still not provide full service, which is fine. Full service is measured by the intent of the image. If work still remains within that intent, the image has not reached the full service standard. Man, I hope I've given a good definition of full service by now. And made sure that you know that it is not a negative. It is not rude. It's not mean. It doesn't mean you don't care if you don't take it to that standard. It's your choice. You do what's best for you and best for your clients with a period at the end of that statement. I'm just describing a different way you may choose, should you want that option. Are you feeling this? Does this make sense? If so, go to the comment section and just give me the word yes. Go to the comments and enter in yes. Now, if you haven't already, enter in hashtag live. Hashtag live, letting me know that you're watching live. Chapter 2. The expectation of a full service photographer begins before the first conversation you ever have with a prospect. So full service photography begins with the first conversation. It begins with what the prospect believes about your work before they ever contact you. That belief is shaped by your client-facing branding, which could include any printed marketing materials or your website, your social media presence, any posts that you make, product images, client stories, process descriptions, pricing language, and the way that you talk about your finished work. Those different items, those pieces, teach people what kind of photographer that you are, what kind of result that you create, what kind of experience they should expect when working with you. If your online presence shows only digital images and talks mostly about session time, location, number of digital image files, prospects will naturally assume that the digital file is the product. They will think the job is to show up, be photographed, receive images, and do whatever they want with those images. And that may be the business model for a photographer, but it is not the full service standard that we're discussing in this lesson. When your branding shows finished artwork, talks about design guidance, explains the process so well that it becomes something that they tell others about, and helps people understand that their portraits or what their portraits can become, you begin shaping a different expectation. The prospect starts to understand that they are not simply booking a photography session. They are entering a guided process that leads to finished artwork displayed in their home, office, or some other meaningful space. Clients do not always know what is possible. In fact, assuming you're the expert and they've not done work with another expert, of course they're not going to know what's possible. But you, as the professional, as the expert, you should. The client may know what they want. They want something meaningful. They may know that they want to celebrate their family, honor a milestone in their lives, remember a certain thing that's going on in their life, a certain stage in their life, or create something beautiful for their home. But they may not know what size makes sense for the wall space, what product fits that space, what style will still feel right years from now, or how a finished portrait could become part of their daily life, where they walk past it and cry tears of joy every day. Knowing this is where the professional leads this process. Full service is not waiting for the client to arrive with their own version of a complete plan. Most clients will not have that ever. If the image is intended to become finished artwork, full service requires a plan that carries it there. You ask thoughtful questions. You listen for what matters to them. You show possibilities that they may not have ever considered or even known existed. You connect the emotion of the portrait to the form it should eventually take. This is where many photographers accidentally weaken the perceived value of their work. If the prospect sees the digital file as the product, price comparison becomes easier for them. No wonder they say things like, that's too expensive, or the guy down the street charges less. Of course they do, because you gave it a room to grow, room to be. They compare file count to file count of someone else, the gallery delivery to what other photographers are delivering, and one download link to another download link. Those are the things they're comparing. But when the prospect understands that the result is guided, designed, produced, and completed, man, the comparison changes. They're no longer comparing digital files, quantity, how it's being delivered. No, they're comparing the process and the outcome. Why do you think those photographers make so much more? Photographers sometimes ask me, how do you wind up with clients who want prints? And often they add I don't think any of my clients have ever wanted anything other than digital files. My answer is simple. Ideal clients value what has been shown, explained, and presented as the intended result. Think about walking into a tool store. If you go to Home Depot because you need screws to repair your deck, you don't accidentally walk out with a scroll saw because you thought it solved the same problem. The items at the tool store are placed, described, packaged. They're all different and explained in ways that help the right person recognize the right solution. So, of course, they don't wind up with something else. The person who needs screws finds screws. The person who needs a saw finds a saw. Portrait photography works the same way. It's humans that we're dealing with. So of course it does. If your branding, website, social post, pricing language, client stories mostly point towards digital files, then it should be no surprise that most of the people who respond will be people who want digital files. If your message consistently shows finished portrait artwork, explains where it can live, shows how it's enjoyed, and presents display as the intended result, then the right clients recognize that value before they ever contact you. Of course, I wind up with clients who want prints. That's the result I've shown. That's the result I've explained, valued, and built my process around. That's one reason full service photography should be visible before they ever reach out to you. The prospect should not be surprised later to discover that you create finished artwork. They should already have a sense that this is your standard. Your website, your posts, your product images, and your client stories should prepare them for that idea. Now, this doesn't mean that every post should sell wall portraits. It does mean your public message should regularly reinforce the finished result. It should show framed portraits. If you do albums, then it should show albums. If you do wall groupings, then show wall groupings. Show installed artwork up on someone's wall. Tell stories about how clients use and enjoy their finished pieces. Explain why size, placement, finish, and the presentation matter. Before digital delivery became the common expectation, the negative was part of the creative and production process, not the finished photograph. A digital file functions the same way when the intended use of the image requires something more. Some photographers begin their client process with a planning session. I call mine a design consultation. The name of the meeting matters less than the purpose of the meeting, but it should have a specific name. Every meaningful step in your process should be named, because named steps are easier for clients to understand, remember, and repeat to others, which is what you want them to understand it so well that they tell others about what you do, and they're able to do it in an intelligent way. A named process also helps prospects see that they are not entering a loose collection of tasks. They are entering a guided experience with direction, structure, intention, expertise. That kind of conversation helps the client move from a general desire to a clear direction that you help them with. Now, they may begin by saying, "We need family portraits." But through the process, they may realize they want a large wall portrait for the living room, maybe a grouping for the hallway, maybe an album for the coffee table, a legacy piece for the next generation. They may not have the words for those things when they begin working with you, because you're the professional, you're the expert who helps them to see it. That's why client-facing branding matters so much. It helps the right people recognize the value before they've even reached out. It also helps prospects recognize when your service may not be the match that they're looking for, which is great. You don't want to waste your time or theirs. So this is a good thing. Strong positioning helps people self-select. I'll say that one more time. Strong positioning helps people self-select. If someone only wants quick digital files, a photographer who specializes in finished artwork may be a mismatch for that prospect. That does not make either person wrong. I mean, it'd be like saying someone enters the tool store for a hammer. It doesn't make screwdrivers bad. It just makes it not the right choice for that person at that time. It simply means the expectation should be clear before any time and energy are invested. Full service photography works best when the client understands that standard early. They understand that they will be guided. They understand that the photographer leads the process. They understand that the work is intended to become something finished and not something handed over halfway for the client to complete on their own. By the time they reach out to you, they should already have begun to understand that. The first conversation should confirm what your branding has already begun to teach. That is how your prospects come to you, already recognizing the value of what you do. And you can see how when someone recognizes the value of what you do, the price becomes secondary. All right. That's the end of chapter 2. So in chapter 1, we established the standard. The photographer carries the work to completion. In chapter 2, we established that prospects should begin understanding that standard before they ever inquire. So in chapter 3, which we're moving into in a second, we move from expectation to execution and answer the question, what does full service photography actually look like once the client begins the process of working with you? So we move to chapter 3. Full service photography gives the client a guided path from desire to direction, and from direction to the final state required by the image's intended use. The client may begin with a simple thought: I need something professional for business. My children are growing so fast. We need family portraits. The desire is real, but it often has not been shaped in a clear direction yet. Not one where you can actually just pick up and go. There needs to be some planning. That's why they want a professional. They may not know what the portrait should become. They may not know where the portrait should live, what size makes sense for that space, what style fits their home or office, or how the final artwork should be presented. So you, as the professional, you lead. By the way, you probably have heard me say a handful of times, home, office, or some special place. There were many times where people doubled their order, or maybe they'd order a family portrait and then order one that was maybe the same size, maybe slightly smaller, to go into the office. So that's why I include that as well. I mean, why is it that they're working so hard? It's because they love their family. So it makes sense that they would have a photograph of their family in their office also. That's just a little aside. Now, a full service process gives the client a path. It does not expect them to understand every option before they arrive. It does not require them to become a designer, a print expert, a framer, installer, a production manager. The client brings what matters to them. The photographer, though, brings the process that turns that meaning into finished work. Sometimes that process is custom designed with the client or built around a clearly designed result the photographer already provides, like mini sessions. The photographer's already provided the result, and the client just decides whether they want that or not. So not every type of photography is built around the same level of customization. Mini sessions, for just give that example, or continue on that example. Mini sessions are often designed around repetition and a predefined outcome. The structure is set in advance, and the client steps into a process that has already been determined. By the way, some people think mini sessions are short sessions. No, short sessions are short sessions. Mini sessions are repetitive. You're offering the same thing to multiple people at the same location where you're not moving. They're coming to you. This could be a studio that you own or rent. This could be a location that you go to that you've got multiple individuals, couples, families coming to. If it's just one, it's not a mini session. It's a short session potentially, or it's a regular session, but it's not a mini session. Mini session means repetitive. At least that's the intent, and that the process has already been determined. Custom portrait work is different, though. The photographer is often building the direction around the client, the purpose of the image, the space where the artwork is going to live, and the final state the image is intended to reach. That kind of path usually does not come from the client arriving with a fully formed plan, though, because most clients don't have that. It comes from conversation that you have with them, thoughtful questions, professional guidance, and helping the client understand the possibilities they may not have known were available. So the client is bringing what matters. You bring the process that turns that meaning into finished work. By the way, if you hear something that you resonate with, that you like, there's a like button for that. Hit that like button. Hit that love button. If I say something funny, there's a button for that too. If I say something you don't like, guess what? There's a button for that too. I encourage you to use them. The process, or that process, may begin with a named planning consultation, design consultation, concept meeting, legacy planning session, artwork design appointment. Doesn't matter what you call it, but give it a name. In that consultation, the photographer begins shaping the direction of the work. The conversation may include the client's story. They're sharing with you their story because you've asked for it. You're going to be talking about the purpose of the portrait, who the artwork is for, where it might be displayed, what feeling it should carry, what style fits the space where it's going to be displayed in, what wardrobe supports the final result, what scale makes sense, what product options are appropriate, what the investment might look like, and what needs to happen before the photography session. This is also where artwork planning begins. The photographer may help the client consider wall portraits, albums, framed pieces, image groupings, desk portraits, gift portraits, or other finished products. There's a lot of things photographers do. This may include where each piece belongs, how it should be displayed, whether the display area needs better lighting. By the way, that's why I worked with an installer, because sometimes the place where the image was going to be displayed was dark. And so they installed lighting above where the portrait was going to be, or was. They install it afterwards sometimes, but I'd like to have it done ahead of time. So what scale fits that space, which finishes and frames support the artwork, and other considerations that are going to match that intended result. So these decisions begin before the photography session because the intended result should influence how the work is created. I mean, it's just nice. It's interesting to me. Some people will ask me, what's a pretty place to do a family portrait? What's a great place to do a senior portrait? Guys, have you missed what's important here? The client is important. You need to find out who they are, what's important to them, and then choose a spot that matches that. So your pretty place, that may be great for you and what you're trying to accomplish. Fine, use it as a plan B. But plan A should be client focused. All these things or where a client begins to feel the difference between being handed options and being professionally guided. A client may think they need an 11 by 14 because that sounds large enough. But when they see what an 11 by 14 looks like above their couch, and through your guidance realize it seems far too small for that space, they may think they want one image and then discover maybe that a grouping tells the story better, or that a larger image fits the space better. They may think they want casual clothing because it feels comfortable, then understand how wardrobe, tone, texture, and contrast affect the finished artwork. They may think that they simply need portraits, then realize they want something that honors a relationship, a milestone, a family role, or a legacy. You don't get that stuff unless you have a conversation with them ahead of time. We'll talk more about custom photography in 3 weeks from now. I'll tell you more at the end of every episode. Those of you who know, well, you know, but if you don't know, at the end of every episode, I tell you what the coming episodes are. I'll tell you what the next 3 are. And it's the third of the 3 I'll be telling you about: custom portrait photography. The photographer is not taking over the client's taste. The photographer is leading the client through decisions they may not have been aware of or not know how to make on their own. That leadership continues into the photography session. The session is not disconnected from the final result. It is created with the finished work in mind. Lighting, posing, expression, clothing, background, composition, emotional tone, all of this should support the intended outcome. If the portrait is meant to become a large wall piece, that affects how it is created. If it's meant for a business office, that affects the tone and message. If it's meant for an album, that may affect variety, storytelling, sequence. You know, I remember one family wanting their artwork for a specific place in their home. Now, that always happens, but it usually happens through conversation. This particular one already knew where they wanted it. Because I was in their home for the planning session, I could see the space on the wall that they were talking about. They pointed, that's where we want the photograph to go. So therefore, I could see the scale of the room around me. I could observe the decor. I could get to know them, where we're going to do this photograph, so that I can make suggestions on where to do the photograph, what clothing to wear, because I knew where this image was going to live after we were done. I knew that this space was large, where we were going to display it, and that an environmental portrait would serve the room and the client best. Now, how do I know that if I am not in their space? I don't. I also considered their personality, their stories, the things they were proud of, the things they're looking forward to, their clothing choices, the feeling that the finished portrait needs to carry. This is one reason full service photography is different from simply creating a gallery and letting the client decide what to do later. The final result begins influencing decisions long before the product order is placed. Now, this is for custom photography and full service photography. I'm not saying every photographer needs to do that. Hopefully, I've made that point multiple times throughout this message. After the session, the photographer continues to lead. I mean, who's the professional here? Who's the expert here? Image selection should not feel like the client has been dropped into a large gallery and left to sort through everything alone. Selection is part of the service. The photographer helps the client narrow, compare, understand, and choose based on the purpose of the work. This is your area of expertise as a full service photographer. Now, how does this happen? I always did it in person, except during the COVID when I did it via Zoom. Now, Zoom's still a good way to do this, or some other Microsoft Teams. There's other ways to do it. But this may happen in person. It may happen via Zoom or through some other guided method. The format can vary. The standard, though, remains the same. The client is not left alone with decisions that belong inside a professional full service process. From there, the photographer helps confirm the finished pieces based on the direction already established. The plan has already shaped the session and the intended final state. Now, the photographer helps finalize the images, sizes, products, finishes, and other details needed to move the work into production. And yes, production is part of the standard. A full service photographer does not hope the client will do a good job of doing the printing of their work. A photographer manages the production path so that finished pieces reflect the quality and intention of the work. That might include working with retouchers, professional labs, framers. By the way, when I say professional labs, I'm talking about Digital Pro Lab. I'll put there. Talking about Digital Pro Lab. Framers, album companies, installers, or other trusted partners. You're going to be working with a lot of, as a full service photographer, you're not going to have time to do everything. It's too many variables. So therefore, you're going to be working with trusted partners, which is fantastic, by the way. They send leads to you. When you're trying to do it all on your own, you're sending leads to yourself, which that you do anyway. But when you're working with these other vendors, who are they going to send business to? Yeah, it's good for marketing. It's just a side effect, but this part matters because the final artwork represents the photographer. If the client takes a file to a lower quality printer, maybe they choose the wrong size. Maybe it's cropped badly. Maybe the proportion changes. Oof. Or maybe they display it in a way that weakens the result. The client may still connect that outcome to the photographer. Yeah, I see stories in social media all the time about a photographer complaining about how the client used the artwork. Well, you're the one who gave them the digital files. What did you expect? They do what they know how to do. If you don't like it, control the process or don't complain. Those are your choices. But no matter what, the images that people see are going to be connected to you. And when the client shares that with others, they may associate that work with you. An artist's work deserves better than being completed by chance. Now, that's this one guy's opinion. Not everyone's going to agree with that. And that's wonderful. It makes it really easy to sell against you guys. When the intended result is displayed finished artwork, delivery and installation bring the process to its intended finish. Sometimes that means installing a framed portrait on the wall in a home or in an office. Sometimes it means delivering an album, placing it where it's meant to be, and photographing it, photographing the family going through it for your marketing. This, end result, is where the decisions made during the initial planning process become that finished result that the client can finally see, live with, enjoy. The client is no longer seeing a digital file on a screen and wondering what comes next. They're seeing the portrait in its finished form because that's what full service photographers do. The client is living with it, sharing it, walking past it, remembering through it, and enjoying the result that they were guided toward. Full service photography is building a process that carries the work to its completion. It's the difference between handing over ingredients and serving a finished meal. Now, that doesn't mean grocery stores are bad. Grocery stores are fantastic. I just choose to serve a finished meal. It's the difference between delivering materials and completing the roof. It's the difference between creating a digital image of a family and completing the artwork where the family can enjoy it every day, walk past it every day, cry tears of joy. The level of service varies by photographer, by business model, price point, client need. Some photographers may have a studio. I know one that picks up a piece of furniture from the home and brings that piece of furniture to the studio so that family can be photographed in a formal setting with the couch the family sits in. Yeah. What an interesting service. That's included in that photographer's service. Some may guide everything from a home office and meet the clients via Zoom. Great. Some photographers may include wardrobe guidance. Yes, I have been in clients' closets. Some may offer hair and makeup. Don't do that. So what do? Hire someone. There's a lot of wonderful hair and makeup people who would really appreciate the work. Some photographers may design wall groupings. Some may deliver finished pieces. Some may install them. Bottom line is the exact structure varies based on what the photographer wants to do to serve their life and the lives of their ideal clients. So while the structure varies, the standard of full service is the same. The photographer leads the client through the decisions and responsibilities required to complete the work. So full service photography is not about doing every possible thing for every possible client. I'm going to put that up on the screen again. And I need to make it big. That's about as big as I can make it. Those are all of the categories of steps. There's a lot of steps within those categories. There's 15 total steps in full service, and no photographer does them all. There's no business model that will require that. And once you go through them, you'll see that they're specific to certain types of work. So therefore, yes, there's 15, and yes, you're probably going to do all 15, but what's within them, you will choose based on what kind of ideal client you have and what kind of life you're trying to build. You get that. By the way, if you could print this, send it to Digital Pro Lab and they can print it for you. Yeah, you'll have to pay for the printing, of course, but you could print this. It's tiny. I mean, I'll put it on the screen again. I'll print. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. That's what it looks like printed. It's tiny. The letters are tiny on it. It is hard to read. You might have some readers that you can use to help you read it. You might choose to have a magnifying glass to help you read it because it's small. But if you print a poster of it, you're good. You're good. But still, there's just a lot of information there, and we're not going through everything that's on that list. But full service photography is not about doing everything possible for every single client. It's about knowing what result you're promising, then building a process that carries that client there with care, with guidance, with professional responsibility. That's how the work moves from an idea to photography session, to images, to finished portraits displayed in the home, office, or some other meaningful space for them to enjoy every time they pass by. This is a long one. There's still one more chapter. Hopefully you guys have time for this. And I should have warned you ahead of time. This particular episode is long. And I've reduced it as much as I could. I think I could probably reduce it more, but I did reduce it because, again, it could have included all this stuff, and it doesn't. Chapter 4. Let's see. Build the service around the intended result. Now, you may feel that the way to make full service photography manageable is to make a list of everything you could possibly do for a client, that list that I showed you. And while that might be a good exercise, and you probably should do that, I want you to start in the same way as everything else, with the result. Begin with the end in mind. What result are you promising? How do you want your ideal client to experience working with you? How do you want the process to benefit your life, your energy, your schedule, your profit? That changes the pressure. You shouldn't offer every service, every product, every kind of appointment, every luxury detail, or every possible form of delivery. No. You need a process that carries the client to the result that you're promising. So whatever variables are correct for that, those are the ones you choose. A photographer who creates finished wall portraits may need a different process than a photographer who creates albums. A photographer who serves business clients may need a different process than a photographer who serves families. For a planning session, a photographer who works from a studio may build that step in the process differently from someone who works on location, from home, through Zoom appointments. The exact structure varies, but the responsibility remains the same. The client is guided to the intended final result that the artwork requires, that the image requires. Start with the end in mind. What do you want the finished work to become? And how do you want your ideal client to feel about it? You know, too many photographers skip this. They sell with odd things like session length. Now, if you're doing mini sessions, that actually makes sense. But what are you selling? You're not selling your time, you're selling the result. Some of them start off with location, package names, number of files they include, delivery timelines. I mean, those are important variables, but those aren't the things that are going to be causing people to choose you. Those are going to be the things that cause people to compare against you. Those things aren't the destination. They're a piece along the way, and all the pieces are important, but the destination is the final result the client receives and enjoys. That's what you should be selling. If the result you are promising is a framed wall portrait, then your process supports that. Your branding shows finished wall portraits. Your consultation should include where the portrait may live. Your session should be created with that display in mind. Your image selection process should help the client choose the images that serve that purpose. Your production process should protect the quality of the finished piece. Your delivery or installation should complete that promise. If the result you're promising is an album, then your process has to support it. What would that mean? Well, the session may need variety, sequence, relationships in multiple ways, tiny details, hands, jewelry, shoes, storytelling. Now, a lot of photographers believe that what they do is storytelling. It's just how you're going to be doing the storytelling. You want it to serve the result, whatever it is that you've chosen. The selection appointment, where you guide them through image choice. By the way, this is for full service. If you don't do full service, you may not do this particular step. The selection appointment may need to guide the client through groups of images instead of only individual favorites when you're doing albums. The design process should help the client understand flow, pacing, emotional progression, whatever it is you want that finished album to convey. Because the finished album is not an afterthought. It's the reason why the process was built the way it was built if you are doing albums. If the result you're promising is a business portrait, then the digital file may be the finished result. In that case, full service means preparing the file correctly for its intended use. The planning process may include guidance on expression, clothing, background, crop, usage, file size, proportion, naming, delivery, how the image should be used across websites, publications, social profiles, marketing materials. Getting your work to completion is not limited to a framed portrait installed on a wall. It matters even when the completed result is supposed to be digital. The point is not print versus digital file. The point is whether the image has reached the final state required by its intended use. So once you know the result, look at every step of your process and ask whether it helps the client move toward that result. Your website, inquiry response, consultation, preparation guide, session, selection process, production, delivery, and your follow-up after everything's done should all point in the same direction. You may need a clearer path. This is where photographers can make immediate improvements. Help prospects see the artwork as part of real life, not just as isolated images on a screen. Maybe your website shows beautiful images, but it doesn't show finished artwork. Therefore, you want to add photographs of framed pieces, albums, wall groupings, an office display, some other type of installed work. Maybe your photograph on the wall, I want you to photograph your photograph on the wall where it is displayed. And I would actually add in people around it admiring the work. I would actually do video of it also for your marketing purposes. Have the client stand in front of the work displayed on the wall and talk about how they love the work, how they love enjoying it and seeing it every day. Help prospects see what your work becomes. Maybe your inquiry response explains availability and pricing, but it doesn't explain the guided process. Add a few lines that help the prospect understand that you will help them plan the finished result. Maybe your consultation asks when and where the session will happen, but it doesn't ask where the portraits may live. So add questions about the client's home, office, meaningful spaces, relationships, purpose, style, and what they hope to feel when they see the finished work. When it comes to the photography session, the intended result influences lighting, composition, posing, wardrobe, background, mood, expression. Maybe your gallery delivery up to this point has left the client with too many decisions. So add guidance. Narrow the process. Help them compare. Help them choose. Help them connect the image to the purpose of the image. Maybe your production process still has clients finding a lab, choosing a size, selecting a finish, and making the final result happen without the photographer who created the vision. As a professional artist, consider whether those responsibilities belong within your process instead of being handed back to the client. That begins with deliberate decisions based on your goals. Your full service process should also support the life you're trying to build. A process that supports your client while supporting, protecting, and honoring your schedule, your energy, your profit, your ideal life. The goal is to build a process that serves the client well and supports the business you actually want to run. That may mean you offer installation only for certain products or investment levels. It may mean you partner with a framer instead of doing the framing yourself. It may mean you use Zoom for planning appointments instead of always going to the client's home. It may mean you create a product menu that is focused on a simple rather than focused and simple rather than offering every single possible option. Full service does not require unlimited options at all. In many cases, fewer options create a better service. Clients often feel more cared for when the professional has already narrowed the path. A roofer does not bring every single shingle sample they can find in the world to the homeowner and say, figure out what you like. A good professional roofer offers appropriate choices, explains the differences, and guides the client toward the result that fits the purpose. Portrait photographers, why aren't we doing the same? You can create a full service process by choosing the products you believe in, the partners that you trust, the steps you're willing to do yourself, and the ones you will lead, and the outcome that you're going to be standing behind. That is how the service becomes clear. That's how your client feels guided. That is how the work reaches completion without creating confusion for the client and chaos for you. When you're starting to move into full service, for those of you who want to do that, begin with a big brainstorm where you're thinking about all the different variables that are possible that you like. Not because you're going to do all those things, just so that you can give each one of those items a little bit of your time and attention. But then begin to implement small, just one small thing at a time, one small step. Name the step. Define it. Maybe add it to your website. Show the result in your marketing. You're going to just by default ask better planning questions because of it. Maybe you're offering an additional finished product. You'll be doing it with more confidence when you narrow it down. Create one wall display example. Build one album sample. Develop one stronger production relationship. Add one follow-up touch after delivery. Full service is designed. It's not an accident. It's designed by you because of the goals that you have. The important thing is that each step moves the client toward the finished result. When a step creates clarity, keep it. When a step creates confusion, refine it. When a step shifts personal, you know what? Let's talk about the professional side. When a step shifts professional responsibility back to the client, decide whether that responsibility begins or belongs in your processes instead. That is how a photographer begins to move from just simple delivery toward intentional full service, not by copying someone else's entire business model, but by deciding what completion means in their own business and then building a path that gets the clients there. So full service photography is just not a pile of extras. It's a promise with a process behind it. The standard begins with clearly understanding the intended result. The service provider builds the path. The professional leads the client through it. So that's how professional photography becomes more than a phrase. It becomes a process built around what the image is meant to become. Now I have some closing thoughts, but before I do that, if any of this has helped you either in understanding more or giving you some ideas, will you let me know in the comments? Maybe you just tell me what those thoughts are. Maybe you just say yes, or maybe you're just saying it's helping, but take a moment and comment. Go to the comment section and leave me a message. Now, if you haven't already, enter in #live. You add that comment. I want to know whether you're watching live or watching the replay. But I suppose I should go to the comments. Hey, there's a bunch of you here. Because this was long, this lesson today was long, I never even looked at the comment section. But that's funny. There you go. Yeah, a lot of good stuff here. This is perfect. I'm not going to put them up on the screen because this is long, but you guys have shared quite a few things, and I appreciate that. Let's move to the closing thoughts, and then I'm going to tell you what's coming over the next 3 weeks. You're going to be interested in that. Not every photographer should build a full service business. I hope I've made that clear. We have different paths, different goals, different clients, different types of work, and different visions for the lives our businesses are meant to support. That's why another photographer's business model is interesting at most. It might give you some ideas. It might show you some possibilities you haven't considered, but you travel your own path. Your ideal life helps you decide what kind of business to build, who you want to serve, how you want to serve them, what kind of work you want to create, and whether full service belongs in that business. But but if you choose full service, make sure the promise is clear. Full service is not defined by where the photographer chooses to stop. It is not defined by the photographer's personal task list. A photographer does not have to be personally have to be all the different parts. They don't have to be the printer, the framer, the album maker, the installer. They may do the work themselves, or they may lead the process through trusted partners, which obviously I recommend. The standard is the completed state of the image. If the image was created for professional digital use, then full service means that image is prepared, delivered, and ready for that use. No more work for the client. If the image was created as a portrait artwork for a home, office, or other meaningful space, then full service means the artwork is produced, finished, delivered, and displayed as intended. If the images were created for an album, then full service means the album is designed, produced, delivered, and ready to be enjoyed. No work for the client. The product varies. The process varies. The business model varies between photographers. But for a full service photographer, the standard doesn't vary. The artist understands the intent of the image. You, as the service provider, build the path. As the professional, you're leading the process on that path. Full service is complete when the image has reached the last possible state required by its intended use. Now, as you know, the Portrait Profit Show is something that happens every single Monday. And so let me tell you about what's coming next. In 1 week from today, this is Just to Impress. Does it matter anymore? By the way, that is June 1st at noon. June. It's already June. Yeah, 1 week from today, June 1st. Dress to Impress. Does it matter anymore? Over the years, how photographers dress, how everyone dresses, has shifted more casual in many cases. And because of that, what is or what feels appropriate isn't always as clear as it once was, which leads to a simple question. Dress to impress, or does it matter anymore? We'll talk about that 1 week from today. 1 week after that is the second Monday of the month, June 8th, where we move it to 6:30 in the evening. On the second Monday of every month, we move it to 6:30 in the evening. And that's because I usually bring on a guest or a panel of guests. And it's easier to get them in the evening than it is at noon. So we move it to 6:30 in the evening. On June 8th, we're bringing in Yusuf Chowdhury. He is fantastic when it comes to online stuff, when it comes to AI stuff. This one is called The Great Reset. because the Great Reset is here. The photography industry isn't just changing, the reset button has been pushed. So I am bringing on digital performance expert Yusuf Chowdhury to pull back the curtain on what it's actually going to take to stay profitable in the AI era. You don't want to miss it. Make sure you're putting these on your calendar. You are busy. You've got a lot of stuff going on in your life. Add it to your calendar so you're less likely to forget. 1 week after that, June 15th, I mentioned this one earlier in this lesson today, custom photography project. Now, this isn't just custom photography. This is actually narrowed down to you have a project. When a potential client asks for a custom photography project, the real question is rarely just, what should I charge? Before you name a price, you need to begin with the end in mind. You need to define the need, structure the offer, separate your time from image usage, and guide the conversation with confidence. If you have ever felt unsure how to price a photography opportunity, this will help you approach it with a clearer path. That is June 8th at noon. And make sure to add it to your calendar. Lens Legends, we've come to the end of another episode. And I hope you have a better understanding of what full service is and why it's not the correct path for every photographer. Different photographers are building different businesses for different clients, different goals, different lives. Full service is not defined by how many products you offer, how many meetings you have, how many extras you include. The product may vary, the process may vary, the business model may vary, but the standard of full service photography does not. If you choose to describe your work as full service, then the commitment should be clear to both you and your clients. The image is carried to the final state required by its intended use. Full service photography is about understanding what the image is meant to become and the building path that carries it there. Thank you, Lens Legends, for your time and attention here today. And thank you for the hard work, the effort that you put into building a photography business that matters. I'll see you next Monday for Landers Photography School and Digital Pro Lab. I'm Jim Landers, and this is the Portrait Profit Show. I look forward to watching you grow. You guys are amazing. Bye for now.